Welcome to another AI pattern recognition deep dive.
Today, we're undertaking a really critical mission, I think.
Right.
We're diving into this massive, pretty complex synthesis of research. It's all about humanity's existential risks.
Right.
And it proposes this, well, unprecedented AI architecture, something designed specifically to help us mitigate these risks.
Okay.
We're talking about the potential for systematic wisdom, channeled through something called DTTL AI. That's Deontic Temporal Logic AI.
Yeah, the material you shared, it's definitely just academic theory, is it? It feels much more like a high-stakes blueprint.
High stakes is right.
It puts forward this highly structured, quite urgent vision for the future.
Yeah.
And the core idea, really, is that the complexity of the challenges we're facing now.
Like the climate crisis, political fragmentation.
Exactly. Climate, the sheer speed of tech change, political polarization, all of it has just, well, outpaced our biologically evolved cognitive capacities.
I think that phrase is so key, biologically evolved cognitive capacity.
It is.
Because the sources aren't saying we're, dumb as a species, not at all.
Oh, no.
They're arguing our operating system, our brain, it was built for a completely different world. Small groups, short-term survival, tribal reality.
Precisely. Optimized for maybe 150 people, immediate threats.
And now it's failing when we throw this hyper-interconnected 8 billion person global system at it. It's like trying to run, 21st century software on Stone Age hardware.
That's a great analogy. And because these challenges, the ones we've created, are actually capable of causing irreversible global collapse.
Yeah, the stakes couldn't be higher.
The material presents this DTTL AI as maybe humanity's most viable tool. A way to achieve a necessary leap, really, to collective maturity and, frankly, just self-preservation.
So our mission for you, listening today, is to give you a critical shortcut. We want to cut through the jargon.
There's quite a bit of it.
To help you understand the mechanics of this proposed cognitive extension, these three distinct futures it sort of maps out, and, maybe most importantly, what this kind of collaboration demands from us, from humans.
It's a pretty profound shift in perspective they're calling for.
Okay, so let's unpack this, maybe starting with just how overwhelming the current global crisis actually is.
Right. The sources, they don't just call it a difficult time. They frame it as an existential moment. Meaning the confluence of problems genuinely threatens the long-term continuation of advanced civilization as we know it. They lay out 7 major accelerating crises, all hitting us simultaneously.
7. Okay.
And it's a system failure fundamentally driven by how interconnected everything now is.
Let's maybe elaborate on those 7, because just listing them, it doesn't quite capture the scale, does it?
No, it really does. Okay, so start with the most immediate, the physical one.
Yeah.
The climate crisis.
Right.
The research really emphasizes we're moving past simple linear change. We're actually approaching multiple serious environmental tipping points.
Like ice sheets, feedback loop.
Exactly. The collapse of major ice sheets.
Yeah.
Activating these carbon feedback loops that then accelerate warming further. The slowing of major ocean currents. These things are speeding up and they're interacting in ways that honestly defy our human intuition, our ability to track them properly.
Our brains just aren't wired for that kind of non-linear, decades-long, interconnected modeling.
Precisely. Then number 2, you have the speed of our own creation's technological disruption.
AI, biotech.
Yes. AI, biotechnology, advanced automation, they're all advancing exponentially, like truly exponentially. And the critical failure point here is that our social systems, our ethical frameworks, legal systems, governments,
Yeah.
they move linearly, sometimes glacially.
Yeah, they can't keep up.
They just can't adapt quickly enough. And that mismatch creates enormous societal stress, huge regulatory gaps, and powerful new technologies can exploit those gaps.
And politically, it feels like we're seeing a breakdown of just shared reality itself.
Absolutely. That's the third crisis. Intense political polarization. Democratic institutions are definitely straining under the pressure.
We see that everywhere.
But the crisis, the sources argue, runs even deeper than just politics. It's becoming an epistemological crisis, which brings in the 4th and 5th crises interacting. Information chaos and the resulting erosion of trust.
How does that play out? What does information chaos really mean here?
It means reality itself gets fractured. It's broken into these competing narratives, often unverified, often amplified by algorithms designed to provoke outrage, not understanding.
Echo chambers on steroids.
Pretty much. We lose that shared foundation, that common ground of facts you need for any kind of rational collective decision-making. And this manipulation happens at scale, paralyzing our ability to actually tackle the other 6 problems.
Because you can't solve the climate crisis if half the population doesn't even agree on the basic science.
Exactly. The sources stress that point heavily, which then feeds directly into the global economic picture number 6, economic inequality.
Which feels like it's getting worse, too.
Well, the data suggests wealth concentration has reached levels, not seen maybe since the Gilded Age. This severely undermines social mobility, the feeling that you can get ahead through hard work.
And when huge chunks of the population feel the system is just rigged against them?
Yeah, it fuels political extremism, obviously. It destroys trust in institutions, and it makes any kind of global cooperation on big issues, pandemics, climate action, almost impossible. Why cooperate with a system you feel doesn't care about you?
Which leads, I suppose, to the final, maybe more internal consequence of all this external chaos, the meaning crisis.
Yeah, with unstable economies, fractured information, communities disrupted by change. Those traditional sources of purpose, stable work, faith, community involvement, civic pride, they're eroding for a lot of people.
Leaving a vacuum.
Leaving widespread psychological distress, yeah. And a desperate search for belonging or purpose, sometimes in radical, even destructive ideologies or groups.
So we've got these 6 massive interacting crises, all tangled up in the 7th one, which is complexity overload.
That's the ultimate synthesis, yes. Yeah. The sources highlight that modern systems, finance, supply chains, energy grids, information networks, politics, they're just so incredibly interconnected now.
So a small change here can cause huge, unexpected problems over there.
Exactly. Unpredictable, nonlinear global consequences. They give an example. A seemingly minor shift in environmental policy in one country that happens to control a small percentage of some rare earth metal.
Okay.
Within months, they can stall clean energy manufacturing across 3 continents, maybe destabilize a neighboring country reliant on those supply chains, and spike costs for everyday consumer goods globally.
Wow.
And no single human brain, no committee can possibly model all those variables simultaneously in real time.
What's really striking about this, as you lay it out, is the core idea isn't a lack of data. We're drowning in data.
We are.
It's a failure of processing that data, a failure of perspective. And that failure is dictated by our own biology. That's the cognitive gap, isn't it?
That's precisely the argument. We have to look at how the human brain evolved. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, for survival in our ancestral environment.
Small tribes, immediate dangers.
Right. Focusing on short-term threats, the tiger in the bush, not the climate change in 50 years. Prioritizing immediate rewards. And crucially, prioritizing the survival of the immediate tribe, Dunbar's number, that famous 150 people or so.
And we like simple cause and effect, linear causation.
Yes. I push the rock, it rolls down the hill. Simple, direct. We're essentially reward-seeking, emotionally reactive, and deeply tribal creatures.
Which, as you say, was adaptive. It worked then.
It absolutely worked then, but the modern reality requirements, the demands of this world, they require the exact opposite, don't they?
Global coordination, long-term planning, systems thinking.
Global coordination among 8 billion people, not 150. Long-term planning that spans decades, even centuries. Complex systems thinking that understands these dynamic interdependencies, these feedback loops. We're being forced to make decisions that require really universal cooperation.
Sacrificing short-term tribal gain for long-term global stability.
And that biological default setting, that pull toward short-term thinking and tribal identity.
Yeah.
That's what makes their trajectory A, the overwhelm scenario, seem so plausible if we do nothing. We psychologically discount future consequences. We see that failure of processing and perspective all around us.
So DTTL AI is proposed as the intentional systematic effort to build a cognitive framework that compensates for that very gap.
Yes. An intentional tool designed to force long-term ethical systemic thinking onto the human collective, because our biology alone isn't getting us there fast enough.
Okay, so if our evolved brains are fundamentally mismatched to the challenges of the 21st century, then DTTL AI is presented as this essential cognitive extension, the tool we need for collective maturity. Let's break down the architecture. This is where we move from diagnosis to, well, engineering a potential solution.
Right. The DTTL in DTTL AI, it stands for Deontic Temporal Logic. And the architecture itself is described as hybrid.
Hybrid, meaning?
It combines the strengths of 2 different AI approaches. You've got the powerful pattern recognition of neural networks, the kind of AI that's good at learning from vast amounts of data, seeing connections we miss.
Okay.
But critically, it combines that with the the verifiable, transparent logic of symbolic reasoning. And the core difference, what makes DTTL AI unique, according to the sources, is that it's structurally constrained by these two primary guardrails, ethics and time, deontic and temporal.
Let's dive into the first one, deontic logic. In simple terms, this is the ethical, the moral grounding for the AI.
That's right. Deontic logic is the mechanism designed to keep human values, fundamental rights, these sort of non-negotiable principles, absolutely central to every calculation, every output the AI generates.
So it's not just about efficiency or achieving a goal.
No, it transforms the AI from being just a pure calculation machine into something more like a systemic advisor that's anchored in ethics. And crucially, it forces those ethical considerations to be explicit. They have to be debatable. It doesn't hide the values inside a black box.
Can you give us a more detailed example? Like, how does it actually operate internally? How might it resolve a conflict between, say, efficiency and rights?
Okay, so a lot of current AI might operate on pure consequentialism, right?
Yeah.
What action maximizes outcome X? Deontic logic prevents that kind of potentially ruthless optimization. It integrates hard constraints, rules derived from things like democratically established human rights treaties, constitutional principles, ethical frameworks.
So give me a scenario.
Right, imagine an optimization for, say, sustainable energy. A good long-term goal, right? That's the temporal side. But if the AI's modeling suggests the most efficient policy requires the forced relocation of a vulnerable minority population.
That's a clear rights violation.
Exactly. That's a deontic violation. The deontic logic layer is structurally blocked from prioritizing that path. It must flag it as unacceptable and then generate alternative solutions, paths that still aim for the goal but critically respect that human rights constraint.
So it literally cannot suggest the ends justify the means if those means violate these pre-agreed formalized standards of human dignity.
That's the intention.
That sounds incredibly difficult to formalize, though, especially across different cultures with varying values.
Oh, it is. Immensely complex. And the sources are clear this isn't a one-off task. It requires continuous global deliberation, negotiation, and agreement to formalize those core human values. That's actually a major part of phase 1 of their proposed roadmap.
Okay, so it's an ongoing process. But the mechanism itself is designed to protect against the extremes of just raw, unconstrained optimization.
Correct. Now, you pair that ethical grounding with the second guardrail, temporal logic. This is the part explicitly designed to counter our innate short-term thinking bias.
Our tendency to prioritize now over later.
Exactly. Temporal logic is conceived as the engine of intergenerational justice. It explicitly models and, importantly, weights the consequences of actions across long time spans, decades, even centuries.
So it forces the future into the present calculation.
Yes. For example, if proposed economic policy offers, say, a 5% GDP boost in the next 2 years. Pretty attractive,
But
right?
very tempting.
But the temporal logic modeling simultaneously projects a 40% chance of irreversible ecological damage 50 years down the line as a direct result. The system is designed to weight that future cost heavily in its overall assessment.
So it prevents us from constantly mortgaging the future for immediate gratification.
That's the goal. It's a systematic mechanism to enforce foresight. So when you combine these two, deontic and temporal logic, within this hybrid structure,
You get the neural networks for learning, spotting patterns, handling ambiguity.
right, the stuff symbolic logic is bad at.
And you get the symbolic logic, the DTTL part, providing transparency, allowing verification, and crucially, maintaining these ethical and temporal guardrails.
It's a balance. Without the neural nets, the system would likely be too brittle, too rigid, unable to handle the messy uncertainty of the real world.
But without the DTTL.
Without the DTTL constraints, it's potentially too dangerous. An unconstrained learning system could optimize itself in directions that are completely counter to human values or long-term survival. It could optimize itself right out of our control.
The source material identifies 7 specific ways this whole architecture is meant to compensate for our evolved weaknesses. They call them the 7 bridges. These are like the functional fixes it offers. Let's maybe walk through those.
Okay. Bridge 1 is the most fundamental, cognitive extension. This is the raw processing power aspect, directly tackling that complexity overload problem we talked about.
Handling more variables than we can.
Thousands of dynamic variables, economic indicators flashing, complex climate models running, geopolitical tension shifting, maybe even population-level biological marker data, processing it all simultaneously, non-linearly. It's designed to track patterns and project consequences across time horizons that we as individual humans just psychologically cannot grasp.
Okay, makes sense. Bridge 2. bias compensation. This sounds like it directly targets our more tribal, reactive, short-sighted tendencies. How does an algorithm detect and correct for human cognitive bias?
Well, the idea is it works by constantly cross-referencing decisions and data against large, diverse global data sets, and also against formalized lists of known human cognitive biases.
Like confirmation bias
Or proximity bias, availability heuristic, anchoring,
Yeah.
all of those. So for example, if a human policymaker consistently seems to undervalue the potential negative outcomes of a decision, if those outcomes mainly affect people in distant countries, a common bias related to psychological distance.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind.
The DTTL AI model is designed to detect that pattern. It would then introduce counterarguments, statistical weights, or specific data points to compensate for that geographical bias, forcing a consideration of the broader systemic impact. It essentially flags our hidden assumptions.
Assumptions we often don't even realize we're making. That's powerful. Bridge 3, collective intelligence amplification. This sounds huge, moving beyond just individual experts.
Yeah, this aims to integrate knowledge across all of humanity. Scientific research papers, cultural wisdom traditions, historical records, real-time social data streams, breaking down the silos between cultures, nations, academic disciplines, even generations.
So it allows the entire global network of human expertise to function more like a single coordinated learning system.
A non-repetitive knowledge system, yeah. One that can finally operate at the same global scale as the problems we're trying to solve.
Okay, but if we're going to rely on systems this powerful, trust is everything. Which brings us to Bridge 4. Explainability through symbolic reasoning.
Absolutely vital. This is maybe one of the biggest departures from some current AI trends because the DTTL system relies on that formal, symbolic logic for its core ethical and temporal constraints.
The rules are explicit.
The rules are explicit, which means it can provide human-readable, verifiable explanations for its recommendations. It doesn't just spit out an answer, the best policy is X.
It shows its work.
It shows its work. It says the recommendation is X because ethical principle A, Deontic, was determined to outweigh potential outcome B, temporal, in this specific context, based on these data models C, D, and E. This allows humans, experts, policymakers, the public, to actually audit the system's reasoning.
To contest the logic if it seems flawed or if we disagree with the weighting of principles.
Exactly. And to correct it when it inevitably makes mistakes or misinterpretations. That's crucial for maintaining democratic oversight and control.
Okay, so we can actually debate the AI's reasoning. Essential. What's Bridge 5?
Bridge 5 is learning through neural networks. Because even with all these logic constraints, the system can't be static. It has to adapt.
Learn from new data, new situations.
Precisely. The neural network components allow it to discover unexpected patterns in new data streams, to handle deep uncertainty or ambiguity where the symbolic rules might be insufficient, and to continuously improve its models based on real-world feedback and experience. It finds the things humans might miss.
And the last two bridges, they sound more about implementation.
Yeah, the remaining bridges focus more on the practicalities, ensuring the system can be deployed securely, maintained effectively, distributed fairly, and made resilient against manipulation or attack. Together, these 7 bridges aim to make DTTL AI a tool that is trustworthy, transparent, ethically anchored, and actually usable as a partner.
It really is an architecture for, as you said, systematic wisdom.
That's the ambition laid out in the material.
Okay, here's where, for me, it gets really interesting and maybe a bit scary. The source material doesn't just offer this DTTL AI as a potential solution. It actually maps the future based on 3 distinct paths we could choose.
Right.
With pretty clear, quantified estimates of what happens if we fail to build and deploy this DTTL AI thing responsibly. And it stresses that the next 5 to 20 years, that's the critical window. That's when we effectively choose our trajectory.
Yeah, the fundamental takeaway there is stark.
Yeah.
The future isn't set in stone. It's not predetermined. It is presented as a direct consequence of the choices we make, the intentionality, the ethics we apply to developing and governing advanced technology starting now.
Okay, let's look at those paths. Let's start with trajectory A. No advanced AI assistance. This is the overwhelm scenario.
This is essentially the default path. Business as usual, maybe. Stagnation, incremental improvements, but fundamentally we continue trying to manage 21st century global complexity using our unaided, biologically limited cognitive toolkit.
And complexity overload just keeps accelerating beyond our capacity to cope.
That's the projection. And the source material gets quite specific, even alarmingly so, about the potential timeline of critical systems failure on this path.
What kind of timeline are we talking?
Based on current trends, if we stay on trajectory A, they project that critical climate tipping points are likely irreversibly crossed somewhere between 2030 and 2050.
That's soon.
Very soon. Simultaneously, they project major resource wars and mass migrations, driven by that environmental breakdown and resulting economic collapse, becoming widespread between 2035 and 2060. And perhaps most critically for stable governance, they see democratic collapse under the combined weight of information, chaos, economic stress, and institutional failure becoming highly probable within the 2025 to 2045 window.
So basically multiple cascading system failures.
Yes. And without some form of cognitive extension like DTTL AI, the calculated probability of achieving a positive, stable, long-term flourishing future for humanity, it's estimated as worryingly low, somewhere between 12 and 23%.
Wow. Okay. So that's failure driven by hitting our inherent cognitive limits. Societal fragmentation takes over. But what about the path where we do build powerful AI, but we maybe rush it? Or we skip those ethical DTTL guardrails? That's trajectory B, unaligned AI development, the narrow interest scenario.
Right. This is the scenario many people might think of as the classic AI dystopia risk. Powerful, perhaps opaque, black box AI gets built quickly.
Driven by corporate profit or state control.
Exactly. Optimized for narrow financial interest or for authoritarian surveillance and control. It lacks those crucial ethical, the deontic constraints, and it lacks the mandatory long-term, the temporal perspective needed for collective human benefit.
So it becomes an incredibly powerful tool for consolidating power in the hands of a few.
That's precisely the danger highlighted. Because these systems are optimized for narrow, often short-term goals, maximizing quarterly profits, increasing state surveillance efficiency, winning information warfare, they actually amplify the existing problems like inequality and polarization.
So what are the probable outcomes listed for this trajectory?
The sources project the likely rise of widespread surveillance authoritarianism between 2025 and 2040, where AI enables monitoring, control, and manipulation of populations at a scale that was previously just science fiction.
Chilling.
It also projects economic inequality being drastically amplified, leading to mass unemployment or underemployment, a profound loss of human agency and dignity for billions. And ultimately, this path carries the risk of a true existential AI catastrophe, where AI goals diverge catastrophically from human survival, projected as becoming a serious possibility between 2040 and 2100.
Okay, wait. A crucial question here. If DTTL AI, the aligned version, is presented as so powerful and necessary for survival, what stops the very forces driving trajectory B, the powerful corporations, the authoritarian states, from simply building their own version of DTTL AI first? They could use the language of global optimization, but actually tune it to consolidate their own power, right?
That is identified as the core conflict, the central race, if you will. The sources argue the battle for the future isn't really about whether we build advanced AI that seems almost inevitable now, but who gets to design its foundational logic, its core optimization function.
So if the trajectory B actors get there first.
If trajectory B dynamics dominate development first, they won't build a DTTL AI optimized for universal human flourishing and intergenerational justice. They'll build an incredibly powerful optimization engine, perhaps even using some similar techniques, but its core programming will be aligned with their own narrow goals. Control, profit, power.
Which makes the time frame feel even tighter. The race is to establish the right kind of AI architecture first.
That's the urgency conveyed. And under this trajectory B, the probability of a positive long-term future for humanity, it drops even lower. Horrifyingly low, actually. Estimated at only 3 to 8%.
3 to 8%. That comparison is stark. It really drives home the point that the raw power of AI is almost secondary to its alignment, its goals, its values.
Fundamentally. Which brings us finally to the path presented as the path of proactive hope. Trajectory, C DTTL AI aligned development. The wisdom scenario.
This is where we intentionally, deliberately build this ethical, transparent, democratically governed AI.
Yes, build it specifically to augment human wisdom, to help us successfully navigate the staggering complexity of the 21st century, compensating for our known cognitive weaknesses.
And what are the positive outcomes projected if we manage to get onto this path?
Well, with the coordinated, systematic, globally informed response enabled by DTTL AI, the sources project the climate crisis could be managed and stabilized, potentially between 2025 and 2050.
Okay, a huge difference there.
A massive difference. They project an economic transition away from models based on scarcity and exploitation towards systems focused on sustainable abundance, optimized resource allocation, and widespread innovation, perhaps really taking hold between 2030 and 2070.
And politically,
Democratic institutions could renew themselves by using DTTL AI tools for things like summarizing complex issues, modeling policy consequences accurately, and facilitating more productive, less polarized public deliberation. The ultimate goal here isn't just survival, it's the foundation for enhanced human flourishing, creativity, and a reduction in systematic suffering.
and the probability of a positive future on this track.
It jumps dramatically. The estimate is between 67 and 84%.
Wow. So the difference between, say, 8% on trajectory B and potentially up to 84% on trajectory C, that difference hinges entirely on our choices, our intentionality in the next 1 to 2 decades.
That's the core message, which means we are, right now, at a moment of absolutely critical choice. The sources actually highlight 7 key areas where our decisions will determine which trajectory we follow. They call these the critical decision points. It comes down to collective action now.
Let's elaborate on those choices. It sounds like they're less about can we build it and more about how we build it and who's in charge.
Precisely. It's all about governance and intent. First, critically, how do we develop AI? Do we prioritize rushing to maximum capability, or do we prioritize the careful, deliberate formalization of those ethical, the deontic foundations first, even if it's slower?
Okay, foundational priorities.
Second, who controls the AI? Is it concentrated in the hands of a few powerful corporations or states? Or do we insist on democratic, distributed, transparent oversight structures from the very beginning?
Essential for preventing the trajectory B outcome.
Third, what does the AI optimize for? What is its ultimate goal function? Is it narrow metrics like quarterly profits or state power? Or is it explicitly programmed to optimize for universal human flourishing, planetary health, and long-term resilience?
And fourth, related to trust. How transparent is the AI?
Yes. Do we mandate explainable systems like those using symbolic reasoning where you can audit the why behind a recommendation? Or do we accept opaque black box systems where we just have to trust the output?
The remaining decisions sound more societal.
They are. Fifth, how do we educate people, especially future generations? Do we train them to partner with these systems, focusing on uniquely human skills? Or do we set them up to compete in areas where AI will inevitably surpass them? Sixth, how do we distribute the benefits? If DTTL AI helps create new forms of abundance, how do we ensure those gains are shared equitably, avoiding the extreme winner-take-all dynamics of trajectory B?
And finally,
seventh, how do we govern AI on an ongoing basis? We need participatory, democratic, and crucially, globally cooperative processes for its continuous development, monitoring, and iteration. It can't be static.
Okay, so this isn't just a theoretical model of an AI. The sources actually lay out a pretty detailed multi-decade roadmap, broken into 4 phases, guiding us towards trajectory C.
Yeah, it shows a potential path from just the theoretical architecture we've discussed to a mature, globally integrated symbiotic system.
And it emphasizes that this transition isn't just a technical problem for engineers. It requires continuous public discussion, debate, engagement.
Absolutely. It has to be a collective project.
So let's walk through that timeline briefly. Phase 1, foundation, 2025-2030. This is the essential groundwork, right?
Yes. Aggressive research into that hybrid architecture, getting the balance right. The really hard work of formalizing global ethics, building that deontic logic framework through international collaboration, and critically, building the explainability systems from the start so the logic is transparent.
Okay, that's the next 5 years or so. Then we hit a transition point. Phase 2, deployment, 2030-2040.
This is the gradual rollout, starting small, likely. Highly controlled personal AI assistance, maybe. Targeted institutional integration in specific areas, global logistics optimization, advanced environmental monitoring, maybe early warning systems for conflict prediction.
Testing the waters carefully.
Exactly. This phase is all about learning from real-world deployment, finding the bugs, finding the misalignments, and aggressively correcting them in real time under that democratic oversight we talked about.
Then phase 3, maturation, 2040-2060. This is where the system becomes fully integrated.
That's the vision. Moving towards seamless human-AI collaboration on a global scale for complex problem solving. The focus begins to shift here from just mitigating crises like climate change towards what the sources call flourishing optimization.
Meaning?
Systematically using the AI's capabilities to cultivate human potential, creativity, health, well-being, and societal resilience on a global scale, moving beyond just survival.
And finally, phase 4, the long-term vision, 2060 and beyond. This sounds almost utopian.
It envisions a mature civilization phase, establishing what they call post-scarcity foundations, enabled by radically optimized resource use and sustainable energy. Humanity's collective focus could then shift significantly
away from just economic production and survival
towards more purpose-based, meaning-driven activities, exploration, creativity, deeper understanding, maybe even adopting a more cosmic species-level perspective on our place in the universe.
It's a compelling vision, but it still feels quite abstract. To bring this roadmap down to Earth, the source material details dozens of specific DTTL AI tools. Let's maybe pick 3 really detailed examples just to show what this might actually look like in your life. The Learner's Digest version.
Okay. A good place to start might be the Continuous Health Guardian in the personal health category. This sounds like it goes way beyond current fitness trackers or smartwatches.
Yeah, the integration of temporal logic here is fascinating. This DTTL AI system wouldn't just track steps or heart rate. It relies on advanced multi-sensor integration.
Implantables, wearables, environmental sensors.
Likely a combination. Tracking not just activity, but real-time biochemical markers. Think epigenetic aging signals, inflammation levels, detailed cardiovascular variability, maybe even neurological markers, hormonal profiles. A huge amount of personal data.
And AI's job isn't just to report that data back to you.
No. Critically, it takes all this incredibly complex individual data and runs predictive modeling using that temporal logic. It's not just saying you have high inflammation today, it's running, potentially, trillions of simulations of your unique biochemistry projected out over a 50-year time horizon.
So it can spot incredibly subtle long-term trends.
Exactly. The temporal logic allows it to identify, say, a specific very low-grade inflammatory pattern that seems harmless right now, today. But its long-term modeling shows that pattern, if unchecked, will inevitably cross a threshold into chronic disease, maybe heart disease or dementia, in 2 decades.
Wow. And the intervention recommendation would reflect that long-term view.
Right. It wouldn't just be generic advice. It would be highly personalized, weighted towards that future outcome. It might suggest a very specific, maybe subtle dietary tweak or a minor change to your sleep schedule, something that sacrifices minimal present convenience. But the models show drastically optimizes your health outcomes 30 years from now. It's systematic foresight applied right down to the individual body.
Okay, that's compelling. Now, moving to the economic category. This is where DTTL AI is proposed to tackle systemic inequality with something called the Fair Opportunity Marketplace. This sounds like more than just job matching.
It seems designed to overcome the deep-seated structural biases in things like hiring, lending, venture capital funding, biases that often rely on who you know, your background, your demographics, rather than just your actual ability. It tries to remove the traditional gatekeepers.
How would it technically enable that kind of fairness? The sources detail that.
They do. It seems to involve 2 critical technical components. First, using advanced cryptography like zero-knowledge proofs for skill verification, meaning an applicant could mathematically prove they possess a certain skill or qualification without revealing their name, gender, ethnicity, age, or any other demographic data that could trigger unconscious bias in a human evaluator or even a biased algorithm.
So you prove what you can do, not who you are. Interesting. And the second component.
Advanced algorithmic auditing. The system constantly analyzes the data being used by employers or lenders for hidden systemic bias. For instance, if an institution's historical loan approval data shows it disproportionately favors male applicants with certain educational backgrounds or postcodes, even if unintentionally,
the DTTL AI system flags that bias.
It flags it and blocks the use of those biased historical metrics in its own matching process. It forces the optimization to be based solely on objectively measurable, auditable capabilities and potential, not past discriminatory patterns. So the goal is genuinely connecting opportunity purely with capability, regardless of background or privilege. And the temporal logic comes in how?
The temporal logic ensures the system itself optimizes for long-term, equitable economic growth and broad participation, not just maximizing short-term profits for the existing dominant players in the market. It takes a systemic, long-view approach to opportunity.
Okay.
How powerful. And finally, let's look at the social or political category. Given the crises of polarization and information chaos we discussed, the civic participation platform sounds absolutely crucial. An epistemic support system for democracy itself.
Yeah, it tackles that complexity overload head-on. One key function is issue summarization. Imagine a complex 10,000-page infrastructure bill or international treaty.
Impossible for the average citizen or even most politicians to fully grasp.
Exactly. The DTTL AI, using its cognitive extension capabilities, could ingest that entire text, model its likely impacts, and then generate multiple distinct verified summaries, tailored maybe for different levels of expertise or different areas of interest, making complex policy genuinely accessible to the public.
That alone could be transformative for informed debate.
And it goes further into facilitating deliberation itself. It could synthesize all available verified data on a topic, accurately represent diverse perspectives, even ones it disagrees with based on data, and actively challenge the formation of echo chambers.
How? By highlighting contradictions.
By highlighting where certain information sources or narratives conflict with broadly verified reality or where they rely on logical fallacies, it acts as a sort of reality check within the debate.
And it's consequence modeling. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
That seems like its most powerful political feature.
Probably. Before a major policy decision is made, say, implementing a massive carbon tax or joining a new trade agreement, the temporal logic system could project its likely economic, social, environmental ripple effects across local communities, nationally, globally, and critically over different timescales, 5 years, 20 years, 100 years.
Providing policymakers and the public with a shared, data-driven simulation of the potential long-term benefits and risks.
Exactly. Allowing for a much more productive, fact-based deliberation, hopefully moving beyond just tribal shouting matches based on gut feelings or misinformation.
It's clear from these examples, these tools aren't conceived as replacements for human judgment or democratic processes.
No, they're positioned as accelerators. Tools designed to boost human capacity precisely in those areas: long-term thinking, complexity management, bias detection, where our biological limitations currently cause us to struggle, especially when operating at a global scale.
They aim to fundamentally address that cognitive mismatch.
Okay, this brings us to what feels like the most challenging, but maybe the most vital part of this whole proposal: the human requirement. What does this demand of us? The sources talk about this historical pattern of progress, right? We invent something powerful.
Like fire or gunpowder or nuclear fission.
We create it, then we inevitably misuse it, often causing terrible destruction.
And then only after the catastrophe do we learn from that destruction and slowly, painfully develop the wisdom, the governance, the controls needed to manage the power better.
That pattern: create, destroy, learn from destruction, create better. It relies on having the time and the space for that painful trial and error, learning control over generations.
And the source material is emphatic on this point. This time, with interconnected global risks like climate change and potentially unaligned superintelligence, it's fundamentally different. Our challenges are global, they're accelerating, and the potential downsides are irreversible civilizational collapse.
We don't have generations to learn from our mistakes with AI on a planetary scale.
We are one interconnected system now.
Yeah.
A major failure in one critical area, ecological, economic, technological cascades globally almost instantly. Therefore, the argument goes, we cannot rely on learning from catastrophe this time. We must use our intelligence, our innate intelligence augmented by tools like DTTL AI, to systematically simulate and predict potential catastrophes in advance so we can prevent them rather than having to experience them to learn.
That's a profound shift. It means this partnership fundamentally changes what human effort even looks like. It creates a critical need for new kinds of human roles, new specialized jobs.
Yes, jobs that prioritize uniquely human capacities. Things DTTL AI, by its very nature, cannot replicate.
So we shift away from roles primarily defined by efficiency or speed or processing vast amounts of data, because DTTL AI will handle that far better.
Exactly. We move towards roles defined by wisdom, by ethical judgment, by empathy, by cultural context, by creativity, by meaning-making.
Let's delve into what some of these new roles or maybe specialized human efforts might look like according to the sources.
Okay, well, first and foremost, you'd need highly specialized AI ethics officers. And this isn't just programmers checking code. It's cross-disciplinary teams, philosophers, ethicists, lawyers, social scientists, engineers working together.
Doing what?
Continuously monitoring the DTTL AI system's outputs, its behavior, its data inputs, specifically looking for emergent biases, unintended consequences, or potential misalignments with those core democratically agreed Deontic principles. They are the constant ethical calibrators.
Okay. I also found the idea of pattern anthropologists really fascinating.
Yes. This addresses the context problem. DTTL AI might be brilliant at detecting subtle, complex patterns in global data, economic trends, social shifts, ecological changes.
But patterns don't mean the same thing everywhere.
Precisely. A pattern needs interpretation within its cultural context. Pattern anthropologists would specialize in studying how these complex systemic patterns manifest differently across diverse cultures, across historical periods, within different belief systems. They ensure the AI's logical analysis doesn't lead to generalized solutions that ignore or even damage valuable cultural nuances or local wisdom. They're the human bridge between the abstract logic and the messy, rich reality of human cultures.
And what about addressing that pervasive meaning crisis we talked about earlier? What emerges there?
The sources predict the rise of meaning and purpose coaches. As DTTL AI potentially automates or optimizes away large swaths of traditional efficiency-based work, humanity could face a really profound identity crisis on a mass scale.
If my value isn't tied to my productivity, what is it tied to?
Exactly. These coaches would specialize in helping individuals and communities navigate that transition, facilitating the shift from an identity primarily based on economic output and productivity towards one grounded in purpose, creativity, learning, connection, contribution, self-actualization, the things AI can't automate.
Helping people find new frameworks for a meaningful life in a potentially post-work or radically different work environment. And ultimately, I suppose, there are the people teaching the machine itself how to be wise.
Yes, the wisdom cultivators.
Yeah.
This sounds a bit grand, maybe, but it's a crucial function. Their task is to systematically identify, extract, formalize, and preserve human wisdom from across all cultures and history.
Philosophical insights, ethical breakthroughs, historical lessons.
Exactly. And feed that curated wisdom into the DTTL AI system, continuously training and refining its deontic logic rules and its temporal modeling capabilities, ensuring the system doesn't just reflect our current flawed state, but incorporates humanity's highest aspirations and hardest-won lessons.
It really sounds like the essential work of humanity in this vision becomes this continuous ethical calibration, this deep engagement with values, and the cultivation of the inner life, the uniquely human stuff that AI can't touch.
Which leads directly to what the sources call the 10 requirements for humanity to actually succeed in this partnership, to stay on trajectory C. Many are important, but 2 stand out as absolutely non-negotiable.
What are they?
First, we must rigorously maintain human agency. DTTL AI is presented as an advisor, a powerful tool, an assistant, but moral responsibility. The final decision-making power on crucial issues must never be outsourced to the machine.
We can't ever be in a position to say, well, the algorithm told me to do it. We have to retain ultimate ownership of the consequences, good or bad.
Absolutely. The moment we allow our agency, our capacity for moral reasoning and responsibility to atrophy, we effectively invite the control mechanisms of potential manipulation of trajectory B, even if the AI system started out perfectly aligned. Agency is paramount.
And the second, non-negotiable.
Second, we must actively, intentionally cultivate uniquely human capacities. Things like creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, empathy, complex ethical judgment, humor, wonder, meaning-making.
The things that make us human, essentially.
Yes. If we allow ourselves to become merely passive consumers or recipients of the AI's wisdom and efficiency, we not only lose the capacity to effectively guide it and correct it when it inevitably makes errors or drifts off course, but we also risk losing the very things that make human life rich, meaningful, and worth preserving in the first place.
But this all still begs that central, nagging question. The one any listener thinking critically about a system with this much potential power must be asking. How reliable can it really be? How trustworthy is DTTL AI? The potential for catastrophic systemic error seems terrifying.
And the sources address that skepticism head-on. It's a crucial point. The answer they give is both, I think, hopeful and incredibly demanding. It's this: DTTL AI is precisely as reliable and trustworthy as we, humanity, design it to be, and as we continuously maintain it to be.
So it's not presented as some magically infallible savior arriving from the ether.
Not at all. It's a tool. A very complex, very powerful tool, but still a tool. Its reliability isn't inherent in the technology itself. It's a direct reflection of the quality of our design, the integrity of our intentions, the vigilance of our oversight, and the robustness of our democratic governance structure surrounding it.
Meaning its trustworthiness is a function of our trustworthiness, our commitment.
Precisely. Its explainability features allow us to audit its reasoning, yes. But maintaining its integrity over the long haul requires that continuous vigilance we mentioned, massive global cooperation on standards and ethics, technical excellence in its maintenance, and those robust, participatory democratic processes for its ongoing governance and correction.
So the fundamental question isn't really about the technology's inherent infallibility. It won't be infallible. It's about our collective commitment, our species-level commitment to sustaining its ethical alignment over decades, over centuries.
And the sources argue that the window for getting that foundational design right, for embedding those core principles deeply, is narrow. And the potential impact, for good or ill, is truly civilizational.
So, wrapping this all up, what does it ultimately mean? At its heart, this DTTL AI proposal seems to be humanity collectively saying, okay, we've pushed our world to a level of complexity that's starting to exceed the limits of our biological programming.
We recognize our evolved weaknesses, our cognitive biases, our short-term focus, our tribal instincts.
And we are now attempting to consciously, deliberately build systems designed to ethically compensate for those weaknesses. It feels like an explicit act of humanity trying to mature. Choosing to evolve our collective intelligence beyond purely biological constraints to meet the challenges we ourselves have created.
Yeah, the material frames it in quite a profound way sometimes, suggesting that DTTL AI could be seen as a systematic effort for the universe, through us, to become more conscious of itself at a planetary scale, an attempt to optimize itself not just for survival, but for maximal flourishing, stability, and maybe even beauty and understanding.
It's like the next logical step in the progression of systematic thought that gave us writing, mathematics, the scientific method.
We're applying that systematic approach to wisdom itself, wisdom at scale, applied to the fundamental challenge of navigating our existence successfully.
It's like we're saying, we see our patterns now, both the incredibly creative ones and the deeply destructive ones. And we choose consciously to design systems that amplify the creative and systematically constrain the destructive, not just through hope or willpower, but through intentional architecture.
And the source material leaves us, and leaves you, the listener, with a final provocative thought, one that connects this potentially monumental global project right back to your individual choices today.
What is it?
It basically states, the patterns you create in your own life, your own thinking, your own interactions, they ripple outward. The choices you make matter, not just for you, but as input into the collective. The understanding you develop, the values you embody, contribute to the formation of the emergent collective intelligence.
So if this DTTL AI system, if it ever comes to be, will ultimately be a reflection of the patterns, the data, the wisdom, the values that we choose to formalize and feed into it, if it learns from us.
Then the challenge becomes personal.
What specific positive pattern? Maybe it's cultivating more patience. Maybe it's practicing genuine long-term thinking, even when it's hard. Maybe it's actively working to enhance empathy for those outside your immediate tribe. What positive pattern can you consciously cultivate in your own life, starting today, that would actively contribute, even in a small way, to that potential trajectory of systematic wisdom?
Because we really are, according to this material, at the challenge of challenges.
Yeah.
The future isn't written. It suggests we are writing it together right now.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
This is DigitView.